We are going to dive in. Good morning, everyone. It's so great to see all of you this morning. Some faces and names I am acquainted with and know well, and I also see some new names and faces. So welcome everyone to the virtual space of ours. My name is Precious Miller, and I am the coordinator of My Best at Michigan Center for Student Success. And today we'll be discussing student resilience and the role that we can all play in student persistence and retention. This webinar was organized to include practical strategies that can be readily applied to enhance what you're already doing at your institution, because I know great work is happening, but this is just to enhance what's already in place. There will also be some moments of reflection, some vulnerability, and hopefully some connection and chuckles, here and there. It's always nice to have some fun in a virtual event. So we'll do our best to incorporate those in our conversations. As always, I begin each webinar with an introduction to my colleagues who are also with us today. I am forever grateful for the opportunity to partner with my colleagues, Jenny Shanker, Erica Oriens, and Katie Giardello. I'm really convinced that we could really solve most of the world's problems in a lunch hour or two. But in all seriousness, I am just amazed at the wealth of knowledge and information that my colleagues share, and that's amongst our team. So if any of you ever have questions or would like to connect with us, we open the door of communication and connection with you all. I'll try my best not to overpromise, Katie, but we could do some serious damage in this world. I also have the honor and privilege of introducing Carrie Ward and Ariel Duncan from Fostering Success Michigan. Carrie is the director of Fostering Success Michigan, and she and I had the pleasure of connecting last year. We actually learned of our overlapping work, and Ariel Duncan is a student who will be joining us today and contributing and enriching our conversations. And when I tell you that you are in for a treat, you really are in for a special treat. So I hope that this is a great dessert to the lunch that some of you are anticipating after this webinar. I am so thrilled to be in good company today. As always, please feel free to engage with us and engage with one another. Place questions and comments in the chat. We welcome connection because I really believe that we are better together, and there's a wealth of knowledge and information in this Zoom space. So if you have a nugget to share or resource to share, please feel free to drop that in the chat. So our objectives today are listed here. By no small feat will we look at and review and have a better understanding and context centered around resilience, what resilience means, and look at that through the student life cycle. We'll also look at and enrich our understanding of resilience as a skill that can be cultivated and how you can cultivate that skill amongst your students. We'll also do our best to describe strategies to support student resilience as students persist to completion and achieve all of their educational and career goals. So we start off with the definition of resilience so that we can all be on the same page about what it is that we're talking about here. So resilience is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties or toughness. The portion of these definitions that resonates the most with me is resilience being the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. And a lot of changes we had to overcome and navigate through the pandemic and some of the aftershocks that are residual effects from COVID-19. All of us, I would wager, have had the opportunity to exercise our resilience muscles. And so these definitions just give us a framework to be on the same page about what it is that we're talking about as it pertains to resilience and supporting students with developing, cultivating, and growing their skills of resiliency. So let's look at and think about resiliency within the life cycle, the student life cycle. I was doing some thinking about resiliency and found the California State University San Marcos student life cycle. It's used by their student success coaches. And I wanted to use this as an example as we look at and talk about resilience, as resilience is something that is needed at each point within the student life cycle. I find that opposition and opportunity often run in pairs, and no one is exempt from the student experience. And so resiliency is something that a student would need to have at every point of their student experience. Having an ability to recover from or adjust to change could be most commonly found as a student pursues their educational goal journey. And so I ask a couple of questions for you all to consider as we move forward in our time together today. And one of those questions is, what is the role that you play within the student life cycle? I know some of you are within student affairs, some of you are within academic affairs, but as we look at a student applying and being admitted into a college, are you a part of that process? Are you a part of enrollment and orientation? And what is your role within that? And then the studentship. So as a student goes through their courses, what role do you play within that? What about their civic engagement and getting involved in community activities and volunteering, graduation, career preparation, and alumni? Everyone has a role within the student life cycle. And so as students go throughout each touch point of their student journey, what ways could you partner with the students so that they have the opportunity to feel, be, and exercise their resiliency skills? I also ask how it is that you see connecting your role to the student experience, and what ways could you further enrich and further develop the role that you play and the role that you can play with supporting students and growing their resiliency. So here are some data points that I thought would be helpful to share as we all are still and continue to learn, grow, and understand the students that are in our institutions. Here you see some data points from the Student Financial Wellness Survey. This was administered to institutions in October of 2020 by Trellis Research. And the survey population consisted of over 94,000 students, with over 10,000 students who actually responded to the survey. And we see from the survey respondents, we learned that a number of obstacles students are facing in their higher education journey. And we know that the challenges that exist are centered around their financial instability, and that could be a significant barrier to students being able to persist. And it adds to the story of students needing resiliency and needing grit to persist to completion. So we see that 78% of the survey respondents are working 20 plus hours a week. That's not including other responsibilities and obligations that students have, but we know that they're working 20 plus hours a week. We also that 70% of students worry about having enough money to pay for school. And at that point in the student life cycle, at this point, that could happen at any point of the student life cycle. A student can worry about money when they apply. A student can worry about money when they are re-enrolling or going into the next term and selecting classes. 62% of students say they would use financial support services if offered by their institution. And then we see that 50% of students are concerned about paying for monthly expenses. And so these concerns are happening whether students are disclosing this information to us or not. I think it would be helpful for us to have an understanding of what our students are experiencing so that we can increase our understanding, but also increase the grace and patience that we are giving to our students, and then also understand that they're facing a lot and having to adapt to change at a constant basis, and sometimes in a moment they are having to adapt and adjust to change. This data also clues us into ways in which we can better support students and better anticipate their needs. So when they're faced with adversity, we can know how to help them navigate through that adversity, or have systems and structures in place to help them prior to that adversity or challenge being brought to them. So Brene Brown is a social worker and researcher that some of you may be familiar with and some of you may be hearing about for the first time. Brene Brown did a lot of research in shame, and she
I think, did we lose Precious?
I'm not hearing her,
Yes,
and she looks
Okay.
frozen.
She is frozen.
or she's miming the rest.
This
She was introducing Brene Brown, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Dr. Brown, I think, is a sociologist, and she specializes in studying shame. So my guess is that she was going to talk about the related studies Dr. Brown has done that discuss shame and resilience and all that good stuff.
And it looks like Precious is probably logging off and logging back in. So I'm wondering if, for those of you who are familiar with Brene Brown, I'm wondering if anybody can add anything about how that might be connected in with student resilience.
So this is a great opportunity for me to encourage any of you that are on Twitter or LinkedIn to also follow Brene Brown and us, because I've actually found some really great nuggets that she shared on her social media handles. And I never take or never miss an opportunity to make a shameless plug for getting connected to our digital communities on LinkedIn and Twitter. So I'm going to drop those links into the chat because we are using those platforms as sort of a hallway discussion replacement for the convenings that we are known to have. So I will drop those links in the chat. And if you're connected on those networks, you may want to follow Brene as well as us. And I see that Precious is back. I was taking the opportunity for a shameless plug. You're shocked none, right, Precious?
I am not shocked at all. Thank you so much, Katie. And thanks to technology for being the most consistent and inconsistent thing during the pandemic. And thank you all for bearing with me as I work through my technology today. Fingers crossed that was the one and only time that will happen this morning. So resiliency, Brene Brown, thank you, Katie, for sharing that you can follow her on social media. You can also follow us on social media. So let's jump back into this before I start rambling. So resiliency and the 5 factors of resilient people. Brene Brown talks about these 5 factors being consistent factors that a resilient person possesses when they are navigating change and difficult situations and circumstances. Having social support available and also connecting with others, such as family or friends, but also college professionals. Think about these 5 factors as you reflect on a challenging time in your life where you had to navigate something that was really tough or challenging. Which one of these factors do you feel you used the most when you were navigating that challenging time? As we are all living through a global pandemic, I'd like to suggest that we all need some resiliency, especially to make it this far. And so what prominent factor would you say you used over the last year? Now, think about a student who might be missing one of these 5 factors. What would happen if they didn't have one of these factors, and how would that student be able to excel in their classes if they lacked the ability to seek help? Carrie and Ariel will help answer some of those questions shortly. So before we fully segue over to Carrie and Ariel, let's talk about the importance of communication and its relationship to resiliency. So as we utilize the 5 protective factors of resiliency, and we understand that resiliency encompasses being resourceful, problem solving, seeking and connecting with others, communication between these parties must be clear so that each individual can understand what their role and also what they can expect from one another. And so I share this, a personal example that I feel some of you might be able to relate to as far as resiliency and communication. So I was in the market for a new phone, as my previous phone was not reliable. It died often, and most of the time it died at the most inconvenient times. So I was on my way to the Verizon wireless workshop to purchase a new phone, and my phone died on the way there. Once I got to Verizon, I talked to the specialist and I said, "Hey, I need a new phone. It died on the way here." And he says, "Well, do you have a wireless phone?" And I'm thinking, yeah, I have a wireless phone. Isn't everybody's phone wireless at this point? And so he takes my phone and places it on the wireless charging station, and my phone wouldn't charge. And he says, "Is your phone wireless?" And I'm like, "Yes, my phone is wireless." And he says, "No, I don't think it is, because if it is, it would be charging." And it clicked to me that our definition of wireless and our understanding and knowledge of wireless was different. He was asking if it was wireless in terms of being able to charge wirelessly. And I was talking about my phone's ability to be accessed in a wireless environment and way. So even though we were both trying to communicate something, we completely missed each other in our communication. My husband and I had a similar situation with Motrin and ibuprofen. I was directing my husband to pass me some ibuprofen because I had a headache, and he couldn't find it. What he could find was the Motrin. Even though that could be the same thing, it was perceived and communicated differently. And so my husband didn't know how to connect or support me, and I didn't know where he was in navigating our medical cabinet to be able to give me exactly what I needed. So we missed each other in that communication. So I'm wondering, how often are we seeing those same or similar situations with office hours and with work hours? Some students perceive office hours to be when a professor is working, not necessarily a time for a student to engage in additional conversation outside of the class setting. And so in what ways are we communicating or not communicating to students? Because whether we're communicated or not communicating something, a message is still getting across. And perhaps there might be times in which we're missing students, and supporting them and being resilient and having grit and being able to persist because we're just passing each other. And so I ask, how is it that you might be communicating with students in a one-on-one space? And I also ask, how might institutions, or your institution specifically, might be communicating with students? Because it all relates and goes back to a student being able to know what they can expect from their institution, what they can expect from working with individuals that represent the institution to make sure that they're getting their needs met. So here are a few additional statistics from the Student Financial Wellness Survey that help us understand communication and resiliency in another way. Here we see that 47% of students speak with financial aid advisors about their financial struggles, while only 41% speak with an academic advisor about their finances. And then we see that 21% speak with faculty members, and then an overwhelming amount of 38% of students aren't talking with anyone. So one of the 5 factors of resiliency is having the ability to seek help. If students are unaware of the help available to them, should we continue to expect them to ask for it? And is the environment that we're creating a safe space for students to feel comfortable sharing their financial struggles? Just some additional things to think about in our conversation today. So the Financial Stability Scale of Adoption Assessment is a tool used within MyBest to assess the institutional practices that help us understand students. It also helps us to create practices for students to connect with resources available within the institution, as well as resources available outside of the institution, and then rounding it out with ensuring that each member of the institution can ensure a student has access to the supports that they need. So there are these practices listed here on this slide are just some examples or snippets that I pulled from the assessment that relate to students' ability to be resilient and persist to completion. So having dedicated institutional resources to plan, manage, and facilitate students' access and use of these services is a system structure that can be used to support student resiliency. But interlinking services is another practice to ensure on-time support for students in their time of need. And it also prevents a student from having to divulge information that they might not feel comfortable with doing. So that 38% of students who aren't sharing their financial struggles with anyone, if services are interlinked, then perhaps they wouldn't have to divulge some of that information. This strategy also goes back to the resiliency factor of a student holding the belief that they can do something that will help them manage their feelings and to cope. So when a student is aware of what's available and we communicate to students what's available to them, they can more easily get their needs met. Broadly publicizing and intentionally embedding available and on-campus support services into the standard student experience inside and outside of the classroom is another strategy that connects with the resiliency factor of of a person being able to be resourceful and have good problem solving skills. And then the last one, faculty, staff, and administrators can recognize student financial stability issues and direct students to department personnel who can assist students in accessing the services. Students can more easily connect with others who are champions for them. And when institutional members can ensure students have access to supports, students can more readily connect to campus professionals and seek the help that they need. Each of these system structures outline the role that institutions as a whole can play with students having resiliency factors and possessing the strength to be resilient more easily and readily. So with that, I will pass the baton over to Carrie Ward and Ariel Duncan, who will now take center stage and talk with you all about Fostering Success Michigan.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today, and I'm especially excited to be here with Ariel, who is an amazing student. I also want to just give a shout out. There are so many of my people here that I recognize names: Judy Arnold, Amy Goth, Lisa Thomas, some people that I haven't seen in quite some time. So good to see all of you. Dinah, I mentioned you earlier. So Fostering Success Michigan is a statewide initiative focused on post-secondary access and success for youth with experience in foster care. So what I want to do today is talk with you a little bit about kind of spotlighting this particular population in relation to resilience. And then Ariel is going to share some of her expertise and experiences as a student. So Ariel, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'd love to. Hi, my name is Ariel. I currently attend Wayne State University. It's my third year. I'm going for public relations. I joined FSM, I think, in 2018, right when I started college. I got introduced through my campus-based support program through Wayne called CHAMPS. And through there, it's just been a journey of my own advocacy. I've done a lot more stuff besides FSM, but I'm just thankful to be here. So thank you.
Thanks, Ariel. Next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit, like give you some background information specifically about Fostering Success Michigan and what we do, and then also talk a little bit about the educational outcomes for youth with experience in foster care to kind of like set up the conversation that we want to have with you. So as I said, FSM is a statewide initiative specifically focused on getting youth with experience in foster care to and through college. We do that in a multitude of ways. We provide support both to the students and the professionals working with youth, and also the 30 campus-based support programs across the state that have on-campus support specifically for these young people. We also provide networking opportunities, so we can bring together all of the people working with the young people and the young people, so that everybody kind of doesn't have to be an expert in everything, that we have experts within our network and you know who to go to if you have questions. And then we provide resources. So we have a very large website, fosteringsuccessmichigan.com, that includes financial resources, information about colleges, all sorts of different resources specifically for both professionals and students. So that's kind of a snapshot of the work that FSM does statewide. Next slide. So I think that what I really wanted to start with was what is foster care, because I think that, I don't want to assume that everybody understands what foster care is. It's a temporary living arrangement for abused, neglected, and dependent children who need a safe place to live. This can look like a kinship placement. So, staying with an aunt, an uncle, or a grandma. It could also be parents, or it could also be like a state placement where they find a foster family or people who are able to care for the young person or child until families have a safe reunification or another permanent living situation. Next slide. So foster care has a big impact on education. The system itself is not necessarily set up to focus on education. It's focused to support health and safety and permanency. And so a lot of times the young person's educational trajectory is disrupted related to that time in foster care. In Michigan, students with experience in foster care or in foster care have a high school graduation rate of 40% compared to 80% of the general population. And then when you look at the young people like trying to get to and through college, about 80% of young people say they want to attend college, but only about 20% get there, and only about 3 to 11% persist without support. So we're seeing better outcomes at those campuses that have support systems in place, but in general, that 3 to 11 graduation rate persists across our nation. Next slide. So I mentioned this before, but again, like the child welfare system isn't set up to focus on education. So, thinking about the experience of foster care and how that might affect a young person, they may change schools multiple times, that they fall academically behind or lose credits. They end up being having to delay graduation. Many times they're moved and untested for learning disabilities. The other thing that really impacts them, and we'll talk a little bit about this today with relation to resiliency, is trauma. So, trauma really does affect that, the survival skills that kind of come up when a young person is in school. And so that can affect also that, that trajectory to and through college. Also, and this is something that Precious mentioned, our traditional post-secondary system is not set up to meet the needs of students with experience in foster care. If you think about the university system itself, there's a huge assumption that a young person is going to have the support of their family to pay for books, to live with during campus breaks, to help them navigate through the entire college process. Many of these students who have experience in foster care age out of the system, which means that they come of age of adulthood and don't have like a permanent adoptive family. So they're on their own and they're independent and they're having to navigate this college system all on their own. I'm wondering, Ariel, if you want to talk a little bit about your high school experience and how supports within your high school got you to CHAMPS.
Well, I can say actually from my experience, I was very vocal in high school about what was going on within the home. I actually saw my high school as like my second home. I talked a lot with the teachers. I would stay after school, partially because I needed the help with schoolwork. I wasn't doing as well grade-wise, just because I was doing so much of explaining and talking. But once my senior year came, I really started to not do as well in the home. I was actually couch surfing with friends my senior year, and so I wasn't really on that direction to go to college. I didn't see that as a route for me, and it was actually my counselor, my school counselor, had sat me down, taken me out of a class and just sat me down and said, hey, what are your plans for the future? And that discussion turned into, a couple of weeks where I would go in and we would look at different colleges in Michigan. And then after that, I had actually, she helped me submit, my application to Wayne State actually was the only one that I submitted the full application to. and I got accepted through a bridge program, which gave me housing for the summer. So I think that's kind of my transition. But I was very vocal with not only my guidance counselor, but I'm talking like the front desk ladies, my math teacher, my choir teacher. I was so vocal about what was going on in the home and how I needed help. And so they were just there so much for me. My senior year, they actually, for like the ending graduation, they gave me little baskets from all the teachers' donations of, startup goods for when I got to college. So I thought that was really cool too. But it was all because I was very vocal and they knew what was going on in my circumstance, which, not all the time it's not going to be that. Sometimes most, foster youth don't really share as much, especially to, school and stuff like that. So, but I'd say for me, it was very helpful to have those supportive adults outside of my foster home and what was going on through DHS. I think it was really helpful to have the school there to kind of help me stay on track in school as well. So.
Thank you, Ariel. Yes, you said she always says exactly what I think she's going to say. It's amazing, but she says it in a brilliant way. So just wanting to pull out there that, she said, I'm very vocal and I was able to ask for help. And that's that first key, or that first factor of resilient people that Precious spoke about before. So I want to twist that instead of calling it 5 factors of resistant people, I want to say it's actually 5 skills. So that asking for help piece, Ariel's right. A lot of students who may be on your campus don't ask for help. I mean, they don't like to ask for help. They don't want to depend on people because they've learned that people actually aren't dependable. So making sure to establish that relationship with those students so that they know that you'll be there for them and respond to their needs. I think that that's really important thing. Next slide. So just kind of to dive into the challenges and obstacles related to post-secondary access and success, we touched on this a little bit. We kind of orient the challenges of our population to 7 life domains, and we place education at the center. And so this graphic kind of illustrates the idea of how all of these different things impact the educational trajectory for a young person. So Ariel mentioned couch surfing. Many of our students really struggle with homelessness, have had experience of homelessness, or have insecure housing related to campus breaks, especially, many community colleges don't offer housing. So that can sometimes be a huge issue. Food insecurity, mental health challenges, underemployment, lack of a social network, connections, transportation is also often a huge problem. If you think about all of the things that it takes in Michigan to get your driver's license, you have to have certain amount of hours in the car. You have to have somebody who's willing to let you use their car to get those hours, somebody who's willing to take you to the Secretary of State. So transportation can sometimes be a huge issue. Trauma is also tied into that, as I mentioned before. And then often there are some life skills gaps that take place where, like a young person just maybe doesn't know how to budget or balance their checkbook. So this big, huge, financial aid refund comes and it's hard for them to know how to budget that money to make sure that it covers all the housing that they need for the semester. So we support students in all of these different ways, and we look holistically at our students in their persistence related to each of these domains. Next slide. So I really wanted to compare the 5 factors of resilient people that Precious mentioned to actual characteristics that are found sometimes with youth with experience in foster care. So the first factor of resilient people is that they're resourceful and have good problem solving skills. Youth with experience in foster care are incredibly resourceful and resilient, but they often display gaps in life skills due to experience in foster care and are less likely to seek help. So they struggle with mental health challenges related to trauma. So their feelings might be overwhelming and difficult to manage, especially in relation to stress. She might see a student who's like in a class or struggling with financial issues, and you may just see them shut down because that's like a survival mechanism that, you know, like they shut down. I don't want to deal with this, that kind of thing. They may also not have social support available to them, and they may also lack that network of supportive adults, as opposed to this like connection with others, such as families and friends, which is, so you're looking at all these different factors of resilient people, and then kind of like the experience of foster care and how that impacts the development of those skills. And so what I really want you to take away from today is the idea that these are skills to develop with your students, and in partnering with them as a supportive adult, you can really help them to be resilient and persist in school. Ariel, so this morning I was thinking about how when the pandemic hit, and you were in class, so you started classes in January, and you were in a communications class, and the communications class went virtual. So I want you to talk a little bit about the experience of that, and talk about any support that you received, either from your coach or you know, any other, well, even support you didn't receive from your professor, not to throw that person under the bus, but, you know, just some examples of like how that whole going online in a communications class played out for you for that particular class.
Yeah, well, and just going into it to add on, I mean, it was it was right after spring break where it transitioned. So they were like, we're just going to keep on extending spring break. Everybody was so happy. And then it's like, well, actually, you're not going to be in class anymore. And yeah, it was a speech and debate class. So I would have to debate on Zoom, and the way I am able like to feel comfortable when speaking up in public or in front of people, I have to know what I'm saying, and I have to know what the other person's going to say to make sure that I know what I'm going to say. It was very nerve-wracking, but ultimately, you know, I did, you know, email my professor, and I told him, is there any way, you know, to be able to make this easier? And he just kind of had said no. The final project of this class was a group project with the whole class, and we were split into 2 different groups, and it was going to be like, we're making a law basically, and it was going to be like on the legalization of something. But basically he took that off, and so all of my assignments and projects leading up to that were kind of going towards my final grade, which I didn't do as well on. I was pushing for this last, you know, final grade, final group project to boost my grade up so that way I would be able to pass. And so I tried to explain that to him, and he said he basically couldn't really give me anything. So I talked to my coach, and she was really understanding of my situation and my circumstance, and how I explained it to her. And you know, we got on a call with my advisor, I think, and I ended up dropping the classes for the rest of the semester, just because, you know, and then actually I ended up taking the class again the spring semester to try to make up for it, you know, me not being able to pass it. Also, it being a communications class, if I would have taken it 3 times, I would have had to change my major if I had not passed it until then. But, you know, my coach was just so helpful. She helped me understand things from the professional side and like what it's looking like, you know, technology and how I'm going to be able to, you know, the credit wise and all that stuff. It was very confusing to me. But ultimately, it was such a easier transition having my coach and having an advisor that understood where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do moving forward. So I think overall, I mean, I couldn't have had a more difficult process. I think it was a little rocky in the beginning just because I didn't see the support that I had. And then when I finally, you know, talked to my coach about it, you know, a week meeting, she just called me and said, hey, how's it going? And that was my time. And I just said, this is what's going on. And she from there was able to help me just like that. So yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It looks like we lost Precious, but I'm just going to keep going. So what I really wanted to pull out from that was just the idea of that, like creating a community within the campus. So the whole idea for me was, going along in a speech and debate class, and you're in person, and then all of a sudden it's not in person anymore. I mean, we all know how it felt to like go from in person at work to like all of a sudden we're on Zoom meetings all the time. I mean, I had no experience doing presentations on Zoom, let alone, a student who was trying to figure out how to navigate that process. And so like just thinking about how Ariel was able to ask for help from her coach because there was already established relationship there. Then that coach went ahead and pulled in additional people from campus to support the students. I think that is the culture that we're trying to create within our campuses that have campus-based support programs. But I also think with my best is that, trying to really cultivate an awareness that all students show up with difficulties, and we need to be able to support those students through those difficulties so that they can build that resiliency skill. Thanks, Ariel. Next slide. So I know you've heard us talk about campus coaches. We actually have a couple of campus coaches here today. Campus-based support programs offer on-site services such as coaching support, food and housing assistance, scholarships, and more to students who have experience in foster care. We have campus-based support programs at about 30 campuses across the state of Michigan. Those services vary. So some of the campuses are very large, robust programs with multiple coaches, designated space, and scholarships and funding, while other programs are just like maybe one point of contact. So some of you I see are like the smaller campuses, but are creating a culture on campus so that many other people know that these students struggle on the campus, and so that if they interface with these students, they know who to refer them to and how to support them. Some of the campuses offer 24/7 crisis, life skills coaching, mentorship, peer community building, and then connection to the campus champions. So that's that culture of support. The programs cultivate a resilience for students with experience in foster care by creating this culture of inclusiveness on campus and create that supportive network for students who may show up on campus without that supportive adult network. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about action steps that you can take to cultivate resiliency with all students. And I'll let Ariel pitch in here too, because I know that she probably has some thoughts, but really just like looking beyond a student's records to learn who they are and what they need to do to get where they want to go. So Ariel mentioned, her experience with her high school counselor where, that counselor Ariel had in her mind that this wasn't going to work for her until the counselor said, hey, what do you want to do? She actually didn't go to her campus coach until her campus coach went to her and said, hey, what's going on? And she said, hey, I'm having trouble with this class. So just knowing that, if you ask those students questions and learn about them, that's actually the first step in making sure that that you have a strong relationship with them and that you can partner with them. Partner with professionals and supportive adults to become a good systems navigator. So I think that systems are really important in all of our campus programs. I think it's important, especially at community colleges, when you have many different types of students showing up. I think that you need to know not only the resources that you have available on campus, but within your larger community. And I know many of you do that. Share your knowledges and challenges. Share your knowledges of the challenges of these students with your school and administration. So I know that that's like really the heart of my best, is to try to make sure that everybody kind of knows that students are showing up with a variety of different needs. So making sure that that's talked about, and making sure that you know where to send students to or how to support students in an effective way when they're in need. And then reaching out to students to check in with them, especially during these times. I think that that's been super important during COVID. There's been a lot of isolation, especially with those students that maybe didn't have family support, and setting the expectation of success and planting the seed of continuing success to pursue goals. Ariel, what else would you recommend professionals do to help students build that resiliency skill?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, this list is probably a lot of what I would have said. But thinking back to what I've said before, a lot of times when you're working, with these youth that come from these backgrounds, a lot of times it's important to make sure that your own mental health is in check, and that it's, you know, going to be helpful when working with these youth. I think a lot of times we can kind of feel how you're feeling. I can just say for myself, I'm like an empath. I can feel off people's energy. So just feeling that you're okay, and knowing that you're good to work with these youth and these young adults on what they're needing to be successful and to be resilient. So, and also know that you're resilient as well. So I think everyone can be resilient in their own way, but just knowing that your own mental health is important as well. So yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Next slide. Another thing to keep in mind related to resiliency, it really requires relationships, not rugged individualism. So there's like this idea, right, where students are pulling themselves up by the bootstraps and, in order to succeed. And really, science tells us that there's no resilience gene. It's an interaction between supportive relationships, gene expression, and adaptive biological systems. So again, it's the building of that skill and making sure that students also have that relationship to support them so that they can triumph over any sort of adversity that they're facing. Also, I want to mention, so we talk a lot, and I say a lot, that students with experience in foster care are resilient. They are. They've overcome so many different things, but we can't say that students who are resilient in one area are just resilient in all areas, right? So again, like there are some survival skills that they've developed in relation to their experiences, and a lot of times in a pickle, those things will pop right up. And it's really an idea of how, okay, that stuff might not be working for them anymore, and they really need a supportive adult there, or somebody on campus who understands that they might be reacting, and to be able to help them build a skill to navigate a process that's not really set up in a student-friendly way. Ariel, do you have additional thoughts?
No, I'm nodding my head the whole time because it's just, yes, I agree 100%.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, next slide. I think that I pass it back to you now, Precious. Okay.
So the quote of 2021 that we all thought was going to stay in 2020 was, "You're on mute." It has followed us. Yes, so I would love to spend some time talking about what you can do, and with what you can do next with the information that was shared today. And outside of all of this suggestions and strategies, Carrie, something that really resonated with me was everyone's ability to validate a student's experience, because we don't know what experience a student is bringing to their educational environment, and then appreciate that they shared whatever it is that they shared, because we know that students are sharing outside of the 38%, which I'm confident that institutions will be able to flip around. Appreciate when a student is sharing, and then respond to the student with resources, with genuineness, and respond in a way that they feel supported and connected with. Ariel, from what you shared, it sounds like that's what a lot of the professionals that you worked with, and teachers and things, they responded to you with care and with empathy. And it seems like you felt that. Is there anything else you'd like to share? If someone was to present to you with validation and appreciation, and respond to you with resources and respect, how would that impact you? Or how has it impacted you?
Yeah, I think I can say for how it has impacted me to, where I am today. I honestly don't think I would be where I am today without the supportive adults that I've had since the beginning. like, honestly, like I can say something for, every supportive adult that I've had, but I think ultimately, they showed the genuine, excuse me, they showed the genuine connection that we had, and they approached it like I wasn't a child, that they were working with me in like a partnership, almost like it was equal, give and take type of situation. So I think those were the most helpful the most helpful connections that I had, to helping me develop into my own, and to be able to take care of myself and to move forward on my own. So I think, yeah, like the partnership and being able to work together instead of working for or against. So yeah.
Mhm. Thank you for sharing that. It reminds me of an MCSS mentor that I connected with a couple weeks ago, and she shared a story about a student who was struggling in one of her courses. This MCSS mentor is also a faculty member, and she shared that she connected with the student and then connected with that student's success coach to try to problem solve and help the student navigate the semester so that they could be successful and get a good grade. Well, by the time this person had the meeting with the success coach, the student had withdrew from her class, but she still wanted to meet with the success coach. And the success coach would kind of responded like, the student isn't in your.
So I'm gonna pick it up because I think that Precious lost internet again. I want to call out one of the things that I ca- I want to make sure that everybody knows that you don't have to be an expert on everything. So, like thinking about how Ariel went to her coach, and then her coach connected her with the advisor. So, just knowing that, like, you don't have to have all the answers, but you have to be willing to connect students to find the answers. That's the authentic thing that students really want from you. The other thing that I'll share too until Precious returns is this idea about transactional relationships and transformational relationships. So I was in a webinar with one of my colleagues, and she was talking about students asking for help from their coaches, and that when students first started at the campuses, they were more likely to ask for help in a transactional way from coaches. So they'd be like, I'm coming to you for X, Y, and Z. And then the campus coach would, like respond to them. And it would be like the more consistency the campus coach showed with those transactional relationships, the more likely it would be that the relationship would build in a transformational relationship, so that then the student would be willing to go to them for other things. And like actually because that coach showed consistency, but then also because that coach showed interest in the student's life, and then what there was skill development and a collaboration and partnership that Ariel talked about really grows out of those types of relationships. Ariel, do you have thoughts about that?
No, you're good. Yes, I love that.
Okay, cool. Welcome back, Precious.
I'm so sorry, guys. This is just, it's so embarrassing. I'm so sorry about the connection issues with my internet today. So staying up to date with the resources that are available on your campus is another strategy, but also being aware of the resources that are available within your community. My Bridges is a website that any person can go in and create an account for free to learn about what resources are available within your community, within your county even. So when you're aware of what's available, it's easier to be able to respond to a student with resources. But, in the event that time escapes you and you're not able to fully understand what resources are available within your community, you can also respond and share what resources are available on campus, but share another person at your institution who could also be a resource. Also assume positive intent. So Carrie earlier mentioned how it's important or helpful to look beyond a student's record and their past courses, or even past behavior. From semester to a semester, a student can change, just like from day to person can change. Our world changed in a day. And so perhaps a student could also have some change. And so assume the most positive intent when working with a student. Also share success stories, because I would hope that hearing how your strategy or how you supported a student would catch fire for another person to say, you know what, that is something I can do. I can respond with resources, or I can change how I'm doing within the classroom or within the admissions process to support students to assume positive intent. Thank you for sharing your story. It's also a way to be a great advocate for community colleges, especially with us going from Community College Month and celebrating community colleges. Sharing those success stories further support community colleges and how each student can be successful at one. Advocate for student-centered approaches. So all of us are sitting at tables at some point in time with individuals who are making some really powerful and impactful decisions. That could be an opportunity for you to advocate and ask individuals at your table or in your spheres of influence if we really have a student-centered approach with this syllabi or with this strategy with connecting with students. Over the course of the pandemic, one thing that we found was that advising offices realized that their hours weren't as complementary to a student's schedule as they previously thought. So they changed it. Some institutions have advising hours that are no longer the traditional 9 to 5, because that was one way of doing it, and now we've moved into another way, and we're choosing to maintain office hours that are non-traditional because it is a student-centered approach. So, in what ways could you advocate and support student-centered approaches at your institution? Another thing you can do is encourage others to join the cause. So you can now call yourself a champion for supporting student persistence and retention and being an advocate for having a role in supporting student resiliency. So share this webinar and some of the takeaways that you received from our conversation and share it with other individuals to allow for this to really catch fire, because I really strongly believe that everyone has a role with supporting students. And so we do have a few minutes left. Ariel, I wanted to ask if there was anything else you'd like to share, and if individuals have a question they'd like to pose to you or Carrie, you can list those in the chat. Ariel, is there anything else you'd like to share? Carrie, anything else? Final thoughts, as people might be posting questions in the chat for you.
Not for me. I just wanted to say thank you for having me on and being able to share my experience. I love these type of panels.
Great.
I just want to mention, so there are some of you today that are very familiar with campus-based support for youth with experience in foster care, because you are my champions. Thank you for your work. I did add to the chat box a couple of links, the link to the Fostering Success Michigan website, and then also a link that has a list of all of the campus-based support programs in the state. My goal really in partnering with Precious is to make sure that we have a point of contact or a champion at every single community college across the state of Michigan. So if you find that your campus is not on there and you are interested in being that campus support champion, please reach out to me. It's, again, you don't have to be the expert on all things foster care. You just have to be willing to help a student navigate and care about the issue. And I wanted to say, if there are any champions on right now that would like to, I'm not going to call you out, but if there are any champions on right now that kind of want to share a little bit about what it's like to be a designated campus champion in the FSM network, I would love to hear from you and have you share. You know who you are.
I'll share. I just want to say, like, I'm involved with both Precious and Katie, and I just think that having the collaboration piece, especially during the pandemic, was the biggest piece for me. Every time I come to one of these meetings, I learn something new, and it just brings things back to my attention because we're all so busy. I think, especially with working with the populations that we're working with, we're busy trying to help. And sometimes we forget about the other things that are happening or going on. And being a part of both of these groups have been very beneficial in that respect. Just having the support, knowing that other people are out there, and knowing what other people are doing that's outside the box has been super helpful. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dinah. I always appreciate you. And I appreciate your masks. You always have silly masks on. They're great. Anyone else, any other champions that I have on here want to share? I won't call you out, but I recognize your names. And I'm responding to a direct message that I have too, so. Thanks, Scott. I'll reach out. Any questions or comments or anything like that specifically for me or Ariel?
Thanks, Dinah. Okay, well, I will, Carrie, is it okay? Can you post your email in the chat? I will add an additional slide with our contact information for those of you who would like to connect with myself or Carrie. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope you enjoy your lunch and enjoy some extra time in your day. I hope that you're able to fill this additional time with some self-love, self-care, and hopefully some exercise at some point today. It's beautiful on my end. Thank you all and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.